Today I'm going to talk about what to expect during the contract process of buying or selling a home in Texas. This is not intended as legal advice, so please do hire an attorney to answer any legal questions as you proceed through this process. This is just a high-level perspective of what to expect without going into great detail. First of all, there are a few notices a seller is required to provide a buyer prior to execution of a contract. If there's a public improvement district, a statutory tax district, a propane gas service area, or if the property is located in a certified service area of a utility service provider. A title agent or property manager can usually help produce the information for the buyer or seller if help is needed. Next, the effective date of the contract is the final date of acceptance where the contract becomes binding. Both the buyer and the seller have agreed to all the terms and both signed and initialed any changes to the contract. The last party to accept must communicate acceptance back to the other party or to their agent so each party knows when the contract performance requirements begin. In terms of calculating dates on the contract, consider the effective date, day 0. Next, the contract is delivered to the title company, who must deliver a title commitment to the buyer within 20 days of receiving a copy of the contract. This includes copies of restrictive covenants and documents evidencing exceptions in the commitment other than the standard printed exceptions. Once the buyer receives the title commitment, they usually have 3 to 10 days, a negotiable amount of time, to issue any title objections such as defects, exceptions, or encumbrances to the title company. This is a legal document, so I highly recommend that buyers have an attorney review the document and advise whether to issue any title objections. If not already provided by the seller, the survey, T47 affidavit, and seller's disclosure should be provided to the buyer, usually within a few days of the effective date, but that time frame is negotiable. The termination option fee is due within 3 days. The termination option is usually 7 to 10 days, but the time frame is negotiable. This is the period of time where the buyer can terminate for any reason. This is when the buyer normally conducts inspections and negotiates repairs if warranted. Notice of termination must be given by 5 p.m. on the date of expiration. If the buyer does terminate, they would typically get their earnest money back and the seller would keep the termination option fee. The earnest money is due to the title company within 3 days unless the last day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. In this case, the time is extended until the end of the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. If there's a homeowners association, the HOA documents are due from the seller to the buyer, usually within about 10 to 15 days, whatever is negotiated in the contract. This usually includes the restrictions, bylaws, rules, and regulations, and a resale certificate from a property owners association, which shows details of HOA costs and other information. The buyer may terminate the contract within 3 days after the buyer receives the subdivision information or prior to closing, whichever occurs first, and get their earnest money back. If the buyer is financing the purchase of the property, there is likely a financing addendum. This usually expires within 15 to 20 days, but the time frame is negotiable. This gives the buyer time to secure buyer approval, which is deemed to be obtained when the terms of the loan are available and the buyer has satisfied the lender requirements related to buyer assets, income, and credit history. Buyer approval is not to be mistaken for loan approval, which can sometimes take all the way up until the closing date to be secured. On another note, if your purchase or sale contract has an addendum for sale of other property by buyer form, then the buyer has a property to sell and needs the proceeds to complete your purchase or sale. This will often expire close to or on the close date of your contract, but that time frame is negotiable. Finally, you have a close date which is negotiable, but often 30 to 40 days from the effective date of the contract. This can be shorter for a cash sale, but most lenders need 30 days to close approximately. Some special lender programs allow buyers to close sooner. If there's a seller leaseback of the property, the first day of rent would be the day following the close date. The promulgated leaseback addendum is set up for the seller to pay the buyer a deposit and the rent for the entire leaseback period at closing. The seller needs to remember to get their deposit back upon the expiration of the leaseback. Sellers, please remember to leave your home clean and move-in ready as a courtesy for the buyers. Buyers and sellers Be sure to read page 1 of your contract to understand what improvements and accessories stay automatically with the sale and what goes with the seller. For example, curtains and rods stay. TVs go, but TV mounts stay per the contract unless negotiated otherwise. The seller should leave utilities active the entire term of the contract and keep all rooms, attics, and storage spaces accessible during the contract period as well. Once the sale closes, be sure to plan to file for a homestead exemption by February 1st of the following year, if this is your primary residence. Otherwise, you won't benefit from the 10% tax cap in Texas. And if you forget, you can file and retroactively get your property tax savings for the previous 2 years, from what I'm told. But this could always change, so consult an attorney or the county tax office to find out. I hope this provides a good summary of what to expect during the contract period, and I want to offer my best wishes for a successful sale.